In the name of Jesus, this flag has to come down. You come against me with hatred and oppression and violence. I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today.
Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you all for joining me for Chapter 4 of An Education of a Black Man. Before we begin, I just want to send a special thank you to those who watched Chapter 3 with Kendrick Johnson, especially those who took the time to sign their name to the petition or donate to the cause. I truly, really do appreciate that. Just like anything in life, every little bit helps, and I truly believe that case needs to be re-examined. And thank you for the words of support also in those who watched the video. It means a lot. It really does. So I want to make sure I took the time out to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. So for this video, as you can probably see from the banner here, we're going to be talking about the Confederate flag. And it's interesting to me how this flag, the history behind this flag, because I didn't know a lot about the flag, even though I've been around it for as long as I can remember, being from a Southern family, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where most of my family resides, and I've seen it on trucks. I've seen it on people's walls. My own roommate in the Army had a Confederate flag hanging up in his wall that I never took negatively because I'd served with the man for 2 years. By the time we became roommates, we'd hung out together, we drank together, we had fun together. We've been through some sucky times together, and he was a good individual. He's a good man. And like I said, there was never any ill will between the two of us. So I never took what he did in the privacy of his own room as an affront to me. Which is not to say that I didn't have negative feelings about the flag itself, because I always associated the flag with racism, plain and simple. I believe that if you had the Confederate flag anywhere in your vicinity, you had some racist undertones to you. And that's not just, parents passing that on to me. That's in my own experiences meeting people who, are strong proponents of the Confederate flag, and then making comments like, before you, I was racist, or, just a couple years ago before I got out into the world, I was racist. And that weird connection between everybody who said that always had a Confederate flag somewhere in their vicinity. Or even just my dad's own experiences, where he shared, he used to working a job where he had to travel to kind of remote locations in Georgia. And one of the locations he went to was an individual who had proudly had the flag displayed all over his property. And then, my dad, being a black man, was very cautious about what he was doing. He made sure he let people know, like, this is the last address I was at. Went, knocked on the house. Person didn't even answer the door. Stood around trying to get the person to come out because they had an appointment scheduled. He never came out. My dad ended up placing a call, trying to figure out, like, hey, is this person supposed to be here? They called the individual. The individual was like, oh, yeah, no, I know he's there. And he had basically been watching my dad the whole time. And then fast forward some parts out there, in a very awkward animosity kind of filled area between that guy and my father, who is a very nice professional individual, did his job. Once the conversation ended, he goes back to the same words of, hey, man, you're not like what I thought you were going to be, basically saying, you're not like those other blacks. You're not the hoodlum that I thought you were going to be. Kind of the same sentiment that seems to underline people who support this flag, in my opinion, and like I said, in what I've experienced and my family seem to experience. So with the recent banning of the flag by NASCAR, I think the military is getting behind it. I know they're removing the Confederate names from their bases within like the next 3 years.
The U.S. Navy plans to ban Confederate battle flags from all public spaces and work areas on its bases, ships, submarines, and aircraft. A spokesman for Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Mike Gilday said in a statement, the order is meant to ensure unit cohesion, preserve good order and discipline, and uphold the Navy's core values of honor, courage, and commitment. News about the Navy's impending ban comes just days after the U.S. Marine Corps issued a similar one that prohibits any rendering of the Confederate flag, including on decorations, bumper stickers, and more. The U.S. Army has also broken from its previous hardline stance and says it's now open to renaming its bases and facilities currently named after Confederate military leaders. An Army spokesperson said Defense Secretary Mark Esper supports this decision.
You're seeing public places taking down the flag, and then even in the clip, you probably just saw, I want to make sure I get her name right, Bree Newsom climbing a 30-foot pole in front of the South Carolina State House to remove the Confederate flag weeks after, the Dylan Roof shooting at the AME church in South Carolina, where he killed 9 black people who were just praying in church because he believed in white supremacy, and he had this whole mindset of, for some reason, black people are coming to rape white women and take over the country.
But those who knew him say they remember him talking about a scheme fueled by his segregationist ideals.
It was a plan. He said that he was planning it for 6 months.
Joseph Meek says Roof told him he wanted to, quote, start a civil war.
It was a race thing because he had told me that it was that the black people were taking over the country, and that he wanted it to be segregation.
The only public photo from his Facebook profile shows him in a swamp wearing the insignia of modern-day white supremacists. One patch representing South Africa's apartheid-era government, the other showcasing the former country of Rhodesia that was also under white rule. Another photo shows Roof straddling the hood of his Hyundai and his decorative plate celebrating the Confederacy.
Right, but he's got pictures of the Confederate flag. So you see this weird correlation between the flag and people who seem to hate our people, which is why I'm taking this episode to kind of educate myself on the flag and seeing if there truly is a disconnect between those who see the flag and see hate, see oppression, see racism, see slavery, and those who are saying that, no, we're just celebrating our heritage, we're celebrating our ancestors, we're celebrating the people that we lost in the war. And then the third group, of course, who are the ones that are using the second group who are celebrating their ancestors and their heritage to also promote hatred and slavery and racism and white superiority. So just a quick kind of background of what I learned about the flag is that this flag that we're seeing right here was not the Confederate flag, was not the national flag that everybody kind of stood underneath one banner. This flag actually belonged to Robert E. Lee, who was at the time the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. And so when the South seceded from the Union, from the nation, right, and became their own confederacy, they had a flag, but the flag was very similar to our own flag, the Union flag. So when they went to war, people had trouble distinguishing between their troops and the other troops because they were flying under the same banner. So the Confederacy changed it to another flag, and that was like a white background, and it had the red and the blue cross up in the corner, but the majority of the flag was white. So when they went into battle, there's a big-ass white flag flowing. Looks like I surrender. And of course, in an honorable battle, it doesn't look good when you're going into battle with the flag that says I surrender, especially for them. Then you fast forward that they have another flag, and it's got like a red bar to kind of help with this whole idea of surrendering. But the thing here, the catalyst that this kind of begins and opens up is that people start experimenting with what their flag is going to be, and different regiments, different brigades now going to battle with their own battle flag. Robert E. Lee had this particular flag when he went into battle, and this flag became popular because Robert E. Lee was becoming popular. He was very successful in battles. He was winning a lot, and he was kind of like the face of the Confederacy. So because of that, this flag became the new symbol of the Confederate movement of winning. Of course, the South lost, and the flag should have been furled up. Should have been locked away in a case, and it should have been something that we learned in proper history books. It should have been something that we examined to make sure that we did not repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. But of course, like any good horror story, it did not stay that damn way. It opened back up. So the flag came back out, and I'm really bad at dates, so I won't try and narrow down exact dates. But the flag came back out in celebration in memoriam of those who lost their lives. So basically, Southerners would gather together and they would celebrate their dead, and they would celebrate those who fought in the war. And whenever these events would occur, they would bring out the Confederate flag that was associated with Robert E. Lee's army. Because of this, the flag kind of grew in popularity and then began to represent the entire Confederate army. And as I said, there was a flag for the Confederacy, but it was not this one. But this one suddenly was dwarfing all the other flags and becoming the Confederate flag. And then at some point, I think in the 1900s, it became the South's flag. The flag, because it was always associated with honoring your ancestors and kind of just what the South stood for at the time. The flag was molded by being used and displayed at all these events. It became tied with the South. So whenever you saw the flag, you thought South. So now the South's flag was the Confederate flag. And kids who grew up in the South with this ideology and this flag would then take their flag to college and when they joined the military. And so the flag was everywhere now because, you know, colleges and the military where you could, how do I say it? You could express, especially colleges, maybe not so much in the army, but the army, I mean, the colleges were places where you could express your personal viewpoints and kind of really show the world what you were about, right? So everybody's posting up the flags of the Confederacy everywhere they're at. And around the 1940s, the Democratic Party had decided they were going to push for the ending of segregation, allowing for integration, and basically the abolishment of Jim Crow laws, which we all know, or we should all know, this is a good thing. We should be integrated. We should be unified. We shouldn't be looking at each other negatively because of skin color. We should not be fighting, and we should not be allowing lynchings to occur, especially during this time where if you were white, you could get away with a lot more crime. This is where we have individuals like Emmett Till, the young 14-year-old boy who was brutally beaten, and then his killers get off scot-free, and the woman who lied is free to continue living her life. You've got the whole the Tulsa riot massacre that happened, you know what I'm saying, during the whole segregation era, and then this white against black mentality. There's an individual I just learned about, and I want to make sure I get his name right, so bear with me for 1 second. Yeah, so you've got the burning of Jim, and his last name is Mick Ilheron. It's like McIlheron. And I'm definitely going to do a story on that one as well, because that is a very disturbing story to what happened to that black man. But, you know, this man was basically publicly tortured as if it was like the circus that come to town. Like little kids, wives, everybody was out there to watch this man get tortured, where he was burned, his genitals were mutilated, and then eventually he was cooked alive, you know. And this is a man who was basically begging to be shot so that he could end it. Though, you know, there are accounts saying that he was very strong throughout this torture. But during these Jim Crow segregation times, these crimes were allowed to flourish and happen. So this is clearly a bad fucking time. This is a time that we need to progress forward towards making a better nation. But here comes the Southerners who broke off from the Democratic Party, deciding that they don't want to abolish slavery. I mean, not slavery, that's already been abolished, duh. They don't want to abolish segregation. They don't want to abolish Jim Crow laws. They do believe that whiteness is superiority and that they should be better than blacks, and blacks should look up to them. So they formed their own party, and I think it's called the Dixie Party, or yeah, they became the Dixiecrats, which was a combination of where they were at, being Southerners, and Democrats, Dixiecrats. And their symbol for their movement was the Confederate flag, the Southern flag. Let's call it the Southern flag at this point. So the Southern flag became their battle cry for championing white superiority. So here we go again, associating the flag with racism. That plain and simple, associating the flag with racism. We already have it being associated with the Confederate side of the war, which you can argue back and forth with whoever you want to argue with what the war is about. I don't believe the war was about slavery, but I do believe that it was a critical component. I say I don't believe it was about slavery because I don't think the Union side too much cared about abolishing it anyway. It was just kind of like along the way of what they wanted to do with the South. And, you know, it worked out, thankfully. It worked out for us. But the South, for sure, stood for continuing slavery, of imprisoning people. Robert E. Lee was a big proponent in slavery, regardless of. I know there's people out there who say, "Oh no, he wanted to abolish slavery and he was a friend." No, he wasn't. No, the hell he wasn't. This man has his written words where he says that he believes slavery is there to help black people. It's because they're not smart enough or courageous enough or strong enough to live on their own, so they need slavery until God ordained it's time for them to be set free and then forged a new path. And this is the same man who, says he was a God-fearing, devout Christian, but would beat his slaves mercilessly if they tried to leave his plantation. In fact, the plantation that he ended up taking over, those slaves were supposed to be freed per the masters, if you want to call them that, his will, saying that his slaves were supposed to be freed. Robert E. Lee didn't want to free him. He got into this legal battle saying that, basically reinterpreting the will and saying that the slaves now belong to him. And for a long time, he kept them until the court stepped in and set those slaves free. But if those slaves tried to leave, he beat them, whipped them himself mercilessly, or he got his overseer to whip them. And then, to add insult to punishment, he would get brine, which is just water and salt. And he would say, wash the slaves' backs with that solution, just so they can really learn their lesson, so they understand what their place is. So this is not a good guy anyway, and this is his flag. So already, flag is bad effing taste in my mouth, and we'll get into the other side of what they intended for it to celebrate, but it's got a bad connotation because of who its champion was and what he believed about my people. So like I said, you got the Dixiecrats who then take the flag and run with it, and during this time, the KKK, who is founded by Confederates right after the war ended, they decided to found the KKK, which we all know is easily at least one of the most recognizable hatred-filled groups of all time. They thrive on white superiority, not just against blacks, but they really hate blacks, but against all races and religions. And they will go through violent means, as we've seen with a lot of stories, to try and establish their superiority. And unfortunately, they had been reinfueled or reinvigorated because of the whole Birth of a Nation movie that came out that painted them as fucking heroes for some reason. Excuse my language, I'm sorry about that.
The second half of the film focuses on the reconstruction of the South after the war and the glorious origin of the film's supposed heroes, the Ku Klux Klan. The film shows South Carolina just after the war being occupied by black Union soldiers who push white people off sidewalks and are sexually aggressive towards white women. In one scene, a young white girl jumps to her death to avoid being pursued by a black man who is looking to force her into marriage.
So the KKK now gets hold of the Southern flag because it started by Confederates, and these are usually Southern individuals, which is not to say KKK is only Southern individuals. It's definitely bigger than that, and there are more people in the North, the West, the East, whatever. It's a broad organization. They're using this flag at their events, at their burnings, at their speeches, at their rallies. You're seeing the Southern flag displayed prominently. So now we've got another hate-filled group, a group that we know hates black people. Hates all people that aren't white, but hates black people, displaying the flag proudly. And then after that, the flag just becomes insanely popular. It becomes commercialized, and this is where you start seeing the Confederate flag on lunchboxes and television shows.
Yeah, baby, Southern by the grace of God. Yeah! Yeah! Yeah. Well, at least we know they're nice up here.
Hurry up. You're late for your Klan meeting, asshole.
Klan meeting? Ah, don't listen to her. The South will rise again. Yeah! Yeah, brother! What the hell's wrong with these people?
Nice roof, redneck. Join us in the 21st century?
You gonna make some friends up here, huh?
I mean, it even crossed over into international waters and became the sign of America for some current countries, or at least Southern America. And so that's kind of where we're at now with the flag. And you have, like I said, the individuals who are black and minorities, and then who are also white too, saying this flag stands for something gross, disgusting, hatred-filled. It needs to be furled. It needs to be hung up for history, but does not need to be displayed in public. Then you got the group who's saying, well, wait a minute, don't infringe upon my rights to speak my mind, to allow me to celebrate what I choose to celebrate. And also their ideals, the underlining ideals are, I'm not celebrating slavery. I'm not celebrating segregation. I'm celebrating my family and the ones we lost in the war, because, you know, there's two sides to every war, and there was a side that had to lose. And so let me celebrate my lost loved ones and not feel guilty about doing so. And then the third ones, as I said before, who are kind of not in the background, they're very forefront, but they're who have taken the flag because they're also Southerners. And this is the part where you say not all Southerners are racist, but the ones that are in these racist groups seem to have Southern origins. They're taking the flag and they're saying, well, this is also my flag, and also fuck you, everybody that's not white. So where does this leave me?
What does this flag represent to you?
My heritage. In 1861, South Carolina was the first state to stand up for its own rights. The history of that flag has so much to do with the Southern heritage, not slavery. And to take a magnifying glass and exemplify one subject that is not good, that no human being should ever own another. But to say that the entire culture and our heritage was wrong for 1% of what went on is just really sad.
At a tourist area close to where slaves were once auctioned, everyone had an opinion. What does this flag represent to you?
I would say insubordination.
It's like a symbol of hate, I guess, to me. I mean, for what it means and what it stands for. I mean, why does it fly higher than the American flag? That's my opinion, but.
Let's just say pride. Prejudice or pride?
The past. That's what it means to me. It means the past. I grew up in the South, and it's just part of our heritage. I'm from a city of 5 flags, and that is one of the flags that we represent in our city. And so to us, it is not just about racism. It is about our Southern heritage.
And what if people say, well, part of that representation of the South is the history of slavery?
That's history. I mean, history is history. I mean, you can look all over the world, and there's history of good and bad, but this is just part of our history.
We're seeing these changes. Right, we're seeing, like I said, NASCAR banning the flag. We're seeing, I think there was another organization. The NCAA is banning the flag. We're seeing these military organizations stepping up to the fight and banning the flag. And then we're seeing these Confederate general names being stripped from military bases. We're seeing statues come down. And then, as we saw with Bree Newsom climbing down and taking the flag down from the state house. And I agree with it. I understand that sentiment because, as I already laid out, this flag is Robert E. Lee's flag, right? So it's not even the Confederate flag. So if you're celebrating the Confederacy and what you kind of all stood for, we'll get to that, but what you kind of stood for, this is not even the flag. It just became the flag. It was Robert E. Lee's flag, who we've already established was a bad individual. He was not a good man in the sense of how he treated other people, especially people that were slaves or black. Did not he somehow twisted in his mind that he was doing good for them by beating them with whips. So that's like the first incarnation of the flag. Then the flag, for a period there, okay, I could kind of see why you would want to celebrate your dead, because at the end of the day, we don't like all of our family members. Some of our family members do some bad things, but you have to love them, right? You try to love them as best, and you want to kind of honor their memory. So I can see this whole period where you're just bringing it out to memorialize them, but then put the flag away. But this flag should have been taken away and kept in a museum or in your closet somewhere. But another group becomes part of the argument because they're seeing this flag so openly displayed, and they're saying, well, you know, I'm Southern and this flag represents Southern, so let me take this damn flag and then make it fit my beliefs and my wishes. And at that time, that was segregation and Jim Crow. Let me keep blacks in their own bathrooms, in their own urinals. Let me keep whites on their side. There should be no commingling. They shouldn't have access to the same education that I have. They shouldn't be able to participate in the voting system like I. They shouldn't be able to represent themselves in this country. They've taken that flag, and now they're proudly standing behind it. So again, another bad indicator for this flag. It's another stain on this flag when you do something like this, when you have a group associated with your flag like this. And then finally, you have the worst group, the KKK coming together and saying that we're going to take this flag and it's also going to represent our causes and our ideals. Probably the worst group that you could have endorse your whatever your symbology is, your flag is, whatever your campaign is. This is not the group you want to endorse it unless you really are letting people know that you don't believe in equality, you don't believe in integration, right?
Night, a mob scene in New Orleans after the former KKK leader and current U.S. Senate candidate squeaked into a debate on a black college campus. David Duke is one of Donald Trump's biggest and least welcomed fans in Louisiana. Duke is barely getting 5% in the polls, but it was enough to get him on a debate stage and voice his admiration for Donald Trump.
I will be Donald Trump's most loyal advocate to make sure his nominees go to the Supreme Court.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my humble duty tonight to introduce you to the Grand and Imperial Wizard of the Invisible Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, Mr. Bill Wilkinson. Oh, Imperial Wizard, can you tell me, and us, 100 years after you your predecessors set the South aflame with the cross burnings, lynchings, and other events, you should be bothering this country still?
To begin with, I believe a slight rebuttal is in order for your opening statements or the opening statements that was made about the Klan. We are not anti-Catholic. We are not anti-Semitic. We believe in the white race. We believe that at this point in time that white Americans are being treated as second-class citizens on lesser issues. Mm-hmm. The one issue we've never changed on is that of segregation. We believe that God has commanded us to separate ourselves from other races.
So three strikes, right? That's what the justice system tells us. 3 strikes and you're out. Here's 3 strikes showing the flag in negative lights. And the flag may have stood for some people for something just, but it comes across negative. It comes across as hate-filled and racist-filled because it's associated with racist acts and racist groups. And when it comes to public displays, the issue, I think, is nobody wants one, the memories, for those who are still alive and can kind of remember a more segregated time frame. Nobody wants the memories of looking at that flag and understanding what that meant, how it felt to go into an establishment and be spit on because you're sitting at the counter, how it felt to have the dogs sicked on you because you're in the wrong part of town, how it feels to walk in a neighborhood that's a little bit nicer than the neighborhood you're supposed to be in and have every eye on you. Nobody wants to remember that, and they are going to remember that when they look at a flag like this that represents that to them. 2, nobody wants to bring other kids up in a world where they're living under that same kind of symbology of that same racism, that systematic racism that keeps getting thrown around. And that's another cool thing. But before I get to that, just imagine as a black person having a child, knowing what this flag represents, and then walking them down the street and they're looking at this flag and they're asking you questions like, what is that flag? What does it mean? Like, why is it flying in the air? And you've got to explain to your child now why that's occurring, why that flag is up there, what it meant for that you and what it means for that child. It's painful. Nobody wants to see that in public. Also, as I mentioned, the whole systematic racism, that's why I think it's great so many organizations are taking the time to remove the flag from public display, because I think they're finally becoming aware of just how ingrained racism really is. They're seeing that, oh, my organization, although we're saying out loud we don't support racism, we don't support segregation, we're allowing people to show signs that do support it. So our actions and words are not matching up. And in fact, since actions speak louder than words, what are we really showing the world? What are we telling people that it's okay to do? And that kind of goes along with the president. That's one of the issues people have with him, is that he's not speaking to the hatred-filled groups. And but he'll speak to the left side, but when it comes to the right side and racist acts that are blatantly racist, he doesn't have words towards them. He's allowing it. He's permitting it. So his words, he'll say one thing about, oh, I'm on your side, I'm here to help you, or whatever that BS he said earlier of what else do you have to lose? But then when it comes to actual action, he's invisible. He's gone. that's a problem. On the flip side of the coin, speaking to those who do want to express their heritage and honor their fallen ones, totally get that. Completely get that. I feel like everybody should be entitled to speak their mind, but also express their love how they feel best. I feel like there's probably better ways that you can express your love for the ones who fell in the war. I don't think you have to use a flag that's been tainted, honestly, to express that love, because I feel like that's a bad way to remember your loved one, unless you also support this new taint that's kind of stained your flag. But I feel like you should probably do that within your home, within the privacy, kind of like I said with my roommate who hung it up on his wall. Hey, whatever you do in your privacy of your room is your business, so keep it up in your home. If it's really that important to you that you honor them, keep it in your home or on your property. When I say on your property, that does not mean go and get a 30-foot, 50-foot pole and then fly the flag so that everybody can see it proudly. Because once again, that goes to this whole idea of public, right? If you want to put it in your yard, in your neighborhood, okay, hey, that's your prerogative. You're gonna have to deal with the consequences of people driving by, but it is your yard and it is your right to celebrate your loved ones how you want to celebrate. But you can't get mad at individuals who see the flag as hatred because of what I just explained. There's too much negative associated with the flag at this point for people to just look past it and allow it to continue to fly and be displayed proudly. And to some extent, I would think that if you're going to be angry at anybody, you should be angry at these groups that took your flag and made it mean something than what you intended it to mean, who tarnished your legacy and your history by associating such negative, evil, and vile acts with the flag. That's who you should be mad at. That's who you should be complaining about and protesting against and saying, not my damn flag to. That if anything, you should want to take these flags out of these people's hands and I don't know, make a stand with the group who is simply promoting unification. That's all. Nobody on this side is spewing hate. We're not saying, or at least I'm not saying, don't honor your loved ones. I'm saying honor your loved ones, but respect those beside you. Because that flag doesn't mean the same thing for both of you. So I guess my final thoughts on this are simply, so many people like to say, I'm not racist. So many people like to say, well, yeah, my friends or this thing is associated with racism, but I'm not racist. And I feel like to that, going back to the Confederate flag, at some point, you've got to ask yourself, why is it that the people that are racist, if you're not racist, the people that are racist are attracted to your symbology? Why is it that these people are so easily aligned with what it is you value? And if you're seeing this pattern of, we like the same person, we like the same stuff, you got to really evaluate, are you being honest with yourself on whether or not you're truly not racist, and are you being honest with yourself and recognizing that the things you value may not be good things? At the end of the day, in the privacy of your own home, celebrate what you choose to celebrate. But in public, it should come down. It should. It represents too much pain. It represents too much trauma to allow somebody to continue to fly that. It just does. Nobody. You say it all the time with Germany, nobody sees flags flying with a swastika on it. Not publicly. Because that's not the history that country is trying to celebrate. It happened. They moved past it, thankfully. And because they're moving past it, they can continue to work together to build a better society. But we're still stuck in this line of, well, I'm not racist. I just kind of value racist things, or I value things that are associated with racism, or I value things that have been tarnished with racism. We can't move forward if we don't together come together and identify the things that we need to leave in the past, the things that have caused too much pain to be allowed to move forward with us, at least not publicly. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in to watch another episode of An Education of a Black Man. For the next videos, I'm not sure. I think I would like to really dive into the case that I mentioned before, and I keep forgetting his name. It's like I said, it's a very to me, difficult name to say, but Jim McIlherron, McIlherron, because it was disturbing. It was disturbing when we were down there. Thank you all, and hope to see you in the next chapter.
Ma'am, 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 start down off the pole. Ma'am, come down off the pole. Off the pole. Ma'am, ma'am, go.
You come against me with hatred and oppression and violence. I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today.
We'd like to.
The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? I'm trying to come down, sir. I'm going to comply. I promise you, I'm going to comply. I'm coming down. I'm prepared to be arrested. It's okay. But I can't. I said when you're pulling on, like I can't get to it.
That's one of those things when that's when the Lord calls you home.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Woo! He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters.
Look at there. That's the word of God. What are they arresting him for?